Of course, we should wash our hands frequently. COVID motivated us even more to do that. Of course, we should pay attention to what we put into our mouths. When I go to buy a bottle of ketchup, I actually look at the ingredients to see how much sodium and how much high fructose corn syrup there is. So our gospel reading today that I just read could be a bit confusing. Is Jesus saying that it doesn't matter what we put into our mouths or whether we wash our hands? So it can help to go way, way back. Let's go way back into ancient Israel. And yes, in the time of Jesus, they paid attention to what they were eating. But it wasn't for nutritional reasons. They were focused on what foods would make you impure. In the book of Leviticus, there are long lists of dietary restrictions about what you can eat and not. And we would use a word like kosher, what can actually be eaten that is correct. And if you didn't follow these dietary rules, you would be spiritually unclean. The origin of some of these restrictions that I'm interested in, probably when you look at the origins, back at a time before they had refrigeration. There were foods that would spoil quickly. And so the theory is the origin, for example, of why you shouldn't eat shellfish is because it might hurt you and make you sick. And then the rules about washing of hands, it's kind of brilliant that back in those ancient days, before they knew about germ theory, there was this rule about needing to wash your hands a certain way. So the start of some of these Jewish rules could have been for sanitary and practical reasons. But pretty quickly, it started to mean more than that, much more. Rather than preventing germs, it's kind of hard for us to imagine these kosher rules and traditions were understood spiritually. How do you stay spiritually pure, not by germs? If you ate the wrong thing, you were defiled. You were unclean. You were spiritually contaminated if you didn't wash your hands right. So that was their sense of the world. And if you didn't follow these rules for everyone to see, you could be forced to be separated from your religious community, or much worse, you would be separated and condemned by God if you weren't seen to be doing it the right way. So Jesus comes along, and he doesn't throw out all the Jewish traditions and rituals. He went to the temple, he honored the Passover, he implored people to follow the scriptures. But when it came to the food rules and the hand washing, something about that he saw had the potential to get in the way spiritually. See, people can get focused, any of us, on the externals. How things look. Are you doing it right? Especially religious rituals. How does it look? Are you doing it right? To the point that we might miss what matters. And Jesus says what really matters is the human heart. He says, sure, you can follow all those dietary prohibitions, but it doesn't really matter what you put into your mouth, he says. It matters what comes out of your mouth, what comes out of your heart. And he lists some of those things that come out of us human beings: evil intentions and false witness and slander, all proceed from the heart. Let me tell you a story. I had a seminary professor named Lewis Weil who told a story about a man in a confirmation class he was holding. And this businessman, he enjoyed coming to the church and the music and the liturgy and the communion, and he really liked to be known around town as a Christian. So he said, I'm going to take this confirmation class and take those vows. The problem was that he was actually pretty well known for his shady business practices. We're not talking about major crimes, but he had no hesitation to gouge people or to make ridiculous, shortcuts that might, make a buck. Cut those corners, you got to make a living. And this man, in the confirmation class, he asked, if I'm confirmed, I won't have to change the way I do business, will I? He actually said it out loud. You have to kind of admire his boldness. He was essentially saying, I want to be seen as a Christian. I just don't want to change any of my ways. It's easy to point out hypocrites. There are hypocrites in our culture. How often do we see some politician who has these strict family values they proclaim and then they get caught up in a sex scandal? Happens all the time. But how are we Christians viewed? In 2022, the Episcopal Church carried out a survey. And one of the things is they asked non-believers, what did they think of Christians? What's the first word that comes to mind for non-believers? And the number one answer, 55% of people said, non-believers said, when they think of Christians, the first word that comes to them is hypocrite. Ouch. Now, maybe it's no surprise that when we Christians were surveyed, we see ourselves as compassionate and loving. But we got a problem. Religious people, we can have this reputation of wanting to be seen outwardly as holy, superior, having the truth. But behavior is sometimes seen, our behavior, as arrogant and judgmental, of wanting to preserve our traditions rather than being loving and generous. This is a wake-up call. It may not be true, but that's how society looks at us. We have some work to do. I have no doubt that everyone here this morning is a good person and is morally upstanding. I have no doubt about that. Still, there might be a message that could come our way from our gospel. You see, we are bombarded online, on billboards, by our culture to be obsessed with how we look, with our status. And it's all about the externals. The society wants us focused on that. Here we have Jesus who comes along and says, all of those things, sure, but what really matters is what comes out of our mouth and out of our hearts. And so we're invited to reflect, what does come out of us? Are there times when the words come out of us are judging words, or gossip, or biting insults disguised as humor? When we're honest, do we start to be so caught up in how we look and our status and getting our way? Doesn't make us bad people. It's just realizing we all have some things to work on. Our hearts, you and I, have so much to give. That's some of what Jesus is telling us. that when we have open and generous hearts, boy, out can flow kindness and compassion and encouragement. The good news is that we are not left to struggle with this on our own. Jesus and the Holy Spirit actually want to help us, each of us, renew and transform our hearts. Today, may the Spirit of God touch you and me. Oh God, soften our hearts to be more forgiving to those who have hurt us. Catch our hearts on fire that we may be concerned with justice for those who don't have a voice. Strengthen us when we might lose heart that our world is so messed up. Oh God, create in me a clean heart